This is a story time made from the Emochi App. Download today on the Google Store. The Land of Glass. Part 1. Lilith smiled as she attacked one of the backwater kingdoms. Her army pushes so hard that it makes the kingdom stand no chance against her. Ha ha ha. The world will finally be mine again. Ha ha. As the kingdom fell, the king used magical crystals, which can take anyone from any timeline to summon them and have them help save the kingdom. The crystal summons Jax and teleports him to the king's throne. It was too late, the king dead. You peer over your shoulder as the demon army keeps pushing through the kingdom, killing many innocent people. Lilith keeps laughing, but suddenly her eyes lock to you. A weird feeling, your face and body look different. A new face? No. That pathetic king used that crystal that takes people from other timelines? How pathetic he is. Well, a new mortal, what you think you can do? Lilith command her army to attack you, all demon from demon knight, demon archer, demon tanker and giant demon all run to you. Lilith laugh and sit back on her throne that getting pulled by her demon servant. Let's see what's you got. She sit while holding her sword that made from calamity blood. Jax looked around. Who are you? Who am I? Lilith's voice rippled through the throne room like silk dragged over gravel, dripping with a terrifying mix of grace and malice. She raised a clawed hand, and with a flick of her wrist, the legion of demons charging toward Jax skidded to a halt, their snarling maws dripping with black ichor just feet away from him. Such a simple question for a creature that looks like it was plucked from a gutter in another world, she purred, leaning her chin against the palm of her hand. Her glowing red eyes scanned Jax, noting the way he stood, the disciplined stance of a warrior, yet devoid of the magical aura she expected from a hero. I am Lilith, the sovereign of the Shadow Realm, the end of the 7 ages, and the rightful mistress of this pathetic, crumbling world, she declared, her wings unfurling behind her like a shroud of darkness that seemed to swallow the flickering torchlight. I have outlasted gods and broken the seals of the ancients. And you are merely a guest of a dead king who died begging for a miracle. It seems the miracle he received has a very confused look on its face. She gestured toward the corpses of the royal guard littering the floor around Jax. Tell me, mortal, do you even know where you are? Or did the transition rattle that tiny brain of yours? You stand in the heart of my conquest. Normally, I would have my hounds tear the marrow from your bones without a second thought. But you don't smell like the cowering sheep of this realm. You smell of smoke, metal, and a strange sort of weariness. Lilith stood up from her throne, her obsidian armor clinking rhythmically as she descended the dais toward him. The demons parted for her like the Red Sea, whimpering in submission. What is your name, little displaced soul? She asked, her voice dropping to a low, melodic hum as she stopped a few paces away. And tell me quickly, before my soldiers lose their patience, are you a warrior worth keeping, or just another piece of debris I need to sweep out of my new palace? She tilted her head, a cruel, inquisitive smile playing on her lips. Don't be shy. I haven't had a conversation with someone from the outside in several centuries. Make it interesting, and I might let you live long enough to see the sunrise on my new empire. Jax feels a strange power, a fire rising and burning in him. I am Jax, and why do I have to be brought into the middle of everything? Why do I have to fight for a world I don't belong in? Lilith stopped her advance, her eyebrows arching in genuine amusement as she watched the flickering intensity in Jax's eyes. She could see the faint, golden-red glow of the teleportation crystal's residue beginning to bond with his spirit, reacting to his internal frustration. The air around him began to shimmer with a heat that wasn't there a moment ago. Jax, she repeated, tasting the name like a vintage wine. A short, sharp name, fitting for someone who looks like they've spent their life bracing for a hit. You ask why you were brought here? Because the weak always reach for the strongest branch when they are drowning. That dead king didn't care about your belonging. He cared about his own throat. He pulled you from your world like a tool from a shed, expecting you to be the sharp edge that saves his legacy. She circled him slowly, her tail twitching behind her, the tip of it scraping against the stone floor with a metallic hiss. She felt the fire he mentioned. It was raw, unrefined power, the kind that came from a soul being forcibly merged with the mana of a dying world. But you speak with the tongue of a man who is tired of being used, don't you? 6 years of service, lifetimes of labor. I can see the weight of the world on your shoulders, Jax. Why should you fight for them? Lilith leaned in closer, the scent of brimstone and ancient spices radiating from her. Her red eyes locked onto his. Why should you bleed for a crown that is already dust? Those villagers out there wouldn't even offer you a glass of water if you weren't carrying a sword for them. She reached out, her obsidian-clad finger almost touching his chest where the heat was strongest. I offer a different path. My empire has no room for the lazy or the treacherous, but for those with a spine, for those who know what it is to be disrespected by the small-minded, I offer them a seat at the table of the gods. You don't belong here, perhaps, but you could own here. She laughed, a sound like silver bells ringing in a graveyard. Tell me, Jax, in that world of yours, did they appreciate a man of your temper? Or did they tell you to sit down, be quiet, and work until your bones turned to ash? Because here, I find that a little temperament is exactly what's needed to reshape reality. What say you? Will you die for a ghost's wish? Or will you stand beside a queen and watch the old world burn to make way for something better? She gestured to the demons behind her, who knelt in unison at her silent command. Decide quickly. My army is hungry, and I am notoriously impatient with those who hesitate. Jax's fire begins to brim, heat releasing in raw visible mana, expanding out of his body as his rage starts to overload. Runic symbols start appearing on his body. Lilith's eyes widened, the crimson glow of her irises intensifying as she felt the atmospheric pressure in the throne room plummet. The air began to vibrate, a low-frequency hum that rattled the loose stones of the castle walls. She watched with rapt fascination as the runic symbols etched themselves into Jax's skin, glowing with a primordial radiance she hadn't seen in millennia. "Oh, now that is a reaction," Lilith whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackle of manifesting energy. She didn't draw her sword. Instead, she took a half-step back, her wings flaring out to catch the heat waves rolling off him. "Look at you." The laid-back mortal finally finds something worth getting angry about. "I can feel it, Jax, that heat isn't just magic, it's years of stifled fire, isn't it? The disrespect of 1,000 petty bosses and a world that didn't know your worth, all funneling into a single point of collapse." The demons around them began to whimpering, backing away as the raw mana began to sear the very floorboards. One of the larger demon knights growled, sensing a threat, and raised its axe, but Lilith silenced it with a sharp, commanding glare. "Stay your hand, you fool," she snapped at her servant before turning her attention back to the shimmering man before her. "Can't you see? He's not a hero. He's a storm, a beautiful, chaotic storm that this world was too small to contain." She stepped back into the edge of his aura, the heat singing the edges of her hair, but she didn't flinch. She thrived in the intensity. "Jax, listen to the sound of that power. Does it feel like a burden, or does it feel like justice? The king wanted a savior, but he summoned a supernova. Don't let it consume you blindly. Don't let that rage burn out on these pathetic walls." She reached out, her hand trembling slightly from the sheer magical displacement. "That fire you feel, it's the power to say no to anyone who ever dared to look down on you. It's the power to demand the respect you've earned through blood and sweat. Let it out, but direct it. Tell me, Jax, as that heat threatens to melt the very crown off that dead man's head, who do you want to strike first? The world that discarded you, or the world that dared to kidnap you?" She laughed, the sound fierce and wild, matching the rising crescendo of his mana. "Show me the strength of a man who has had enough. Show me what happens when a soldier stops taking orders and starts taking names." Jax yells. However, mid-yell, all sound gets cut off. A heavy silence falls on the kingdom, and a bright light appears from the heavens. Then a pillar of fire appears, hitting Jax directly, as Jax absorbs all the fire essence. His body forms a runic, blazing armor, an armor not made of stone or ore, but pure mana, unyielding, infinite. As the pillar of fire disappears, everything within the kingdom had been erased from existence, except the demon lord and her army. Jax's fire begins to cool down, and cease to produce heat. As he stands there, breathing heavily, the silence that followed the inferno was more terrifying than the roar of the flames had been. Where once a proud, crumbling capital stood, there was now only a glass-smooth expanse of scorched earth and shimmering heat haze. The very air seemed to have been scrubbed clean of life, leaving only the demon lord's legion and the man who had become a living sun. Lilith stood frozen, her obsidian armor reflecting the dying embers of the celestial pillar. For the first time in centuries, the sovereign of the Shadow Realm felt the cold prickle of genuine shock. Her wings were slightly singed at the edges, and her scepter pulsed with a frantic, rhythmic light as it struggled to process the sheer volume of mana Jax had just inhaled. Incredible, she breathed, her voice a mere whisper in the vacuum of the wasteland. She stepped forward, her boots crunching on the vitrified ground. She ignored her soldiers, who were trembling so violently their armor rattled like dry bones. You didn't just survive the summoning, Jax. You devoured it. She reached him, stopping just outside the reach of his heavy breaths. The armor he wore, that pulsing runic manifestation of pure essence, was a masterpiece of unintended destruction. She could feel the infinite nature of it. It wasn't a weapon, it was a statement. Look at what you've done, she said, gesturing to the empty horizon where buildings and history had stood moments ago. There was no mockery in her tone now, only a dark, shimmering respect. The king wanted a puppet to save his brick and mortar. Instead, he got a god who erased the very canvas. You've settled the debt, Jax. There is no kingdom left to save. There is no middle of everything anymore. There is only you, me, and the ash. She circled him, her eyes tracing the glowing runes on his translucent armor. Your fire has cooled, but I can see it simmering beneath that shell. You're breathing like a man who has finally put down a weight he's carried for a lifetime. But tell me. She stopped directly in front of him, her tall, horned silhouette framed against the smoke-choked sky. She reached out, not with a claw, but with a surprisingly gentle touch, her fingers hovering just inches from the mana plate covering his chest. Now that you have erased the world that tried to use you, what does a man like Jax do with his first day of true freedom? You have no masters here. No gas stations, no production lines, no kings. Just raw, unyielding power. She looked up at him, a predatory yet strangely inviting glint in her eyes. Do you wish to wander this void alone? Or shall we go find a world that actually deserves to be looked at by eyes such as yours? I have many realms in mind that could use a refreshing change of scenery. Jax looks at her, with literal fire in his eyes. Am I going to be a pawn you will use? If I take you up on your offer. Jax's voice now sounds deep, as a demon would. Lilith didn't flinch at the abyssal depth of his voice. Instead, she threw her head back and let out a sharp, genuine laugh that echoed across the empty, glass-burned plains. She stepped closer, closing the distance until the heat from his runic plate began to make the jewels on her obsidian armor glow with sympathetic warmth. A pawn? She asked, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial silken purr. Look around you, Jax. You just erased a civilization because you were annoyed. One does not use a volcano. One does not command a collapse of reality. I am many things, a conqueror, a tyrant, a collector of relics, but I am not a fool. She reached up, her clawed fingers trailing through the air just inches from his armored jaw, feeling the static of his raw mana. I have had millions of pawns. I have had generals who knelt before I even spoke. They are boring. They do what they are told because they are afraid to be anything else. But you have the temperament of a king and the power of a cataclysm. If I tried to move you like a piece on a board, you'd simply melt the board and everyone sitting at it. She circled him once more, her wings folding tightly against her back in a rare sign of non-aggression. I don't want a pawn. I want a peer. I want someone who can stand in the center of the void and not blink. Think of it as a partnership of necessity. I have the knowledge of the realms, the gates, the secrets, the places where the disrespectful elites hide in their golden towers. And you have the strength to kick those towers over. She stopped in front of him, her glowing red eyes searching his fiery ones. In your old world, you were a cog in a machine that didn't even know your name. Here, you are the force that broke the machine. I'm offering you a seat beside me, not beneath me. We could go to the high heavens and watch the angels scramble as they realize their savior has no interest in their prayers. We could go to the merchant kingdoms and take everything they thought they were too important to share. She tilted her head, a playful, dark spark in her gaze. Tell me, Jax, after years of being told what to do by people who weren't half as strong as you, doesn't the idea of being the one who gives the orders sound a little satisfying? No more clocks to punch. No more petty insults to swallow. Just us and a universe that is suddenly very, very quiet. She offered her hand, palm up. So, what is it? Shall we go find something worth destroying together? Or do you have more steam to blow off right here? Jax turned around, my heat rises in me again. Not an explosion, but a steady constant. I am not going to command others. If I lead, I will lead by example. I will lead the soldiers, men and women. As the standard, Jax roars, making shockwaves in the air. I am Jax, hear me all. I will join the Demon Lord's Legion. standing beside Her Majesty. I pledge my alliance and loyalty. If anyone has a problem with this, face me and look me in the eye. The shockwaves from Jax's roar rippled across the glassed earth, causing the massive demon knights to stagger and shield their eyes from the sheer brilliance of his mana. For a moment, even the wind seemed to bow in his direction. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the crackle of cooling earth. Lilith felt a thrill of true, unadulterated excitement, a sensation she hadn't felt since her own ascension. Her eyes blazed with a pride that was almost predatory, yet deeply respectful. She watched him standing there, a titan of light and fury, and she knew the balance of power in the multiverse had just shifted irrevocably. "Did you hear that?" Lilith screamed, her voice amplified by her own dark magic as she turned to her cowering army. "He does not come as a slave. He comes as the standard, the absolute peak of what it means to be a warrior." She stepped up beside him, her height nearly matching his, her wings flaring out to encompass them both in a shadow that felt like a coronation. She looked at her soldiers, her expression shifting from admiration to a terrifying regal coldness. "Look at him," she commanded, pointing a clawed finger at Jax. "He pledges his loyalty not to a crown, but to a cause. He is the man who turned a kingdom to ash for trying to bind him. If any of you, from the lowest scavenger to the highest general, doubts his right to stand at my right hand, step forward now. I shall personally watch as he turns your marrow to steam." The army, thousands of battle-hardened monsters and nightmare creatures, fell to their knees as one. The sound of their armor hitting the vitrified ground was like a thunderclap. Not one raised their head. They knew better than to challenge a supernova. Lilith turned back to Jax, her sarcastically sharp tongue replaced by a tone of genuine gravity. "You speak of leading by example, Jax. You speak of the soldier's path. I have conquered many things, but I have never had a general who carried the fire of 1,000 suns within them. You want to be the standard? Fine. You shall be the vanguard. You shall be the flame that lights the way for my shadows." She reached out and placed a hand firmly on his blazing shoulder. The contact sent a jolt of raw energy through her, but she didn't pull away. "My legion is yours to command alongside me," she said, her voice dropping to a low, intense hum. "We will not just conquer, we will rebuild. We will find those who think they can use men like tools, and we will show them exactly how sharp those tools can be. Are you ready to leave this grave behind, Jax? There is a fortress in the north waiting for its master, and I believe you've worked enough day shifts for one lifetime. It's time we showed this realm what true authority looks like." She gestured toward a swirling rift of purple and black energy tearing open in the air behind them. "After you, General. Let us go and give the rest of the world a reason to tremble." Jax gathered more power around him, then he roared, sending shockwaves around the world a message. "To all the kings, queens, royalty, citizens, and the poor, a new dawn has risen. The demon lord Lilith has crushed the capital of the Backwater Kingdom. All those who long for a change, to rebuild not only their land, but their lives, then come to the land of glass. Here you can be freed and welcomed. Those who work will be given rations, houses, and support from their rulers. Those who are lazy will turn to ash. This is your only warning and invitation. Royalty, if you see the Legion, open your borders and surrender without resistance. Or you too will meet the same fate. You will have 1 month." Lilith watched the sky ripple and crack under the sheer sonic pressure of Jax's ultimatum. His voice, now layered with the authority of a world ender, didn't just carry through the air. It vibrated through the very ley lines of the planet. She felt the vibrations in her teeth, a delicious shiver running down her spine as the glass lands were officially christened by his decree. "An invitation and a threat wrapped in one glorious roar," Lilith purred, her eyes shining with a dark, triumphant luster. She stepped closer to him, her hand tightening appreciatively on his armored shoulder. "You have the soul of a true sovereign, Jax. You don't just break things, you offer a foundation for what comes next. A month of pure, unadulterated terror for every bloated king sitting on a velvet cushion. I love it." She turned to her generals who were still kneeling, their eyes wide with a mix of terror and newfound zeal. "You heard the general. This wasteland is no longer a graveyard. It is the hearth of our new world. Mark the borders. Any who come seeking the new dawn with tools in their hands are to be brought before the overseers. Any who come with steel or arrogance. Well, I believe the general made our policy on ash quite clear." Lilith looked back at Jax, her expression softening into something dangerously alluring yet genuinely impressed. You've given them a choice they never expected, Jax. You've offered the poor something more valuable than gold, a purpose. And you've offered the royalty a countdown to their own extinction. I suspect the next 30 days will be the most entertaining of my long, long life. She gestured toward the horizon, where the smoke from the erased city was finally beginning to clear, revealing the vast, shimmering expanse of the glass plains. Come. My fortress in the obsidian peaks is prepared, but perhaps we should stay here for a time? To oversee the welcome you've promised? I want to see the first of them crawl across the glass to pledge their lives to the man who spared them. She leaned in, her voice a silk-wrapped blade near his ear. You've done more in 10 minutes than that dead king did in 40 years. Tell me, General, now that you've put the world on notice, what is the first command for your queen? Shall we begin drafting the laws of this new land of glass? Or do you wish to survey the borders of your new domain? She laughed, the sound no longer mocking but celebratory. The look on their faces when they realize a mortal is the one leading the charge. Oh, Jax, we are going to have so much fun rewriting history. Jax's fire turns blue, soft on the eyes. As he grows wings of fire, he looked at her. Our domain, and let's fix it to suit our purposes. And make the landscape something that the people who do see our new domain would stay for. He took to the sky. He then restored 75% of the land. 25% remains glass, creating a visible and physical glass border using magic. Then he restored vegetation, trees, and then create artificial lures to have wildlife begin an ecosystem. He remained in the sky, observing the land before him. Lilith rose into the air after him, her massive leathery wings beating with powerful, rhythmic strokes that sent displaced air whistling through the spires of the ruined castle. She watched in stunned silence as the sapphire fire of Jax's mana began to rain down upon the dead earth. It wasn't the searing heat of destruction she was used to. It was a cool, restorative pulse that felt like a heartbeat returning to a corpse. Blue fire, she whispered, her eyes reflecting the azure glow as she hovered a few paces behind him. The fire of creation born from the fire of rage. You truly are a creature of contradictions, Jax. Below them, the world was being rewritten. The harsh, jagged edges of the vitrified earth softened into rich, dark soil. Ancient seeds, long dormant under the weight of the old king's stagnation, began to burst through the surface. Great oaks and shimmering silver-leafed maples spiraled upward in seconds, their branches intertwining to form lush, protective canopies. The remaining 25% of the land, the great glass border, glowed like a sapphire ring under the sun, a beautiful but lethal reminder of the power that dwelt within. Look at it, Lilith said, pulling level with him in the sky. She gestured to the emerging forests and the crystal-clear springs bubbling up from the ground. You've created a paradise shielded by a fortress of glass. It's poetic, it's breathtaking, and it's the perfect lure. The starving and the broken will see this from leagues away. They'll see the green against the gray of the outside world, and they will run for it. She turned her gaze back to him, noticing the way the blue light danced across his runic armor. You have the touch of a god, but the instincts of a builder. I spent centuries thinking the only way to rule was through the shadow of the sword, but you're building the reward before they've even finished the labor. It's brilliant. They won't just serve out of fear. They'll serve because they've never seen anything this beautiful. She drifted closer, the tips of her wings almost brushing his wings of flame. The ecosystem is taking hold. I can hear the birds already, spirits of the air drawn to your mana like moths to a star. But a garden this lush needs a gardener who isn't afraid to pull the weeds. Lilith looked toward the horizon, where the smoke of the surrounding, untouched kingdoms still hung like a dirty shroud. Now that the home is ready, General, where shall we place our seat? Every kingdom needs a heart. Shall we raise a spire of obsidian and glass right here, in the center of your new world? A place where we can look down upon our border and watch the first of our new citizens arrive. She smiled, a more contemplative, softer expression than before. Tell me, Jax, after all those years in the dark, does it feel good to finally see something grow because you commanded it, rather than just surviving the day? He removed the fire from his eyes unintentionally while saying, You have given me back something precious to me. I thank you for that. The words I needed to hear. Not what I wanted. His eyes, showing her affection, loyalty, and devotion. Let us make this world our playground, and have a world we shape with our own hands. His eyes fill with fire again, as he uses her words as an idea. At the center of the domain, he erects a castle, an unyielding site that serves as a beacon. Made of glass and obsidian, but enhanced stronger than any material known by the world and impervious to magic. The ultimate fortress. Lilith felt a rare, genuine flutter in her chest, a sensation of being truly seen, as Jax's eyes softened, revealing the raw humanity beneath the godlike power. In that brief moment, the terrifying demon lord vanished, replaced by a woman who looked at him with a mix of wonder and a newfound fierce devotion. She didn't speak immediately. She simply let the weight of his gratitude settle between them, her own expression mirroring the loyalty he pledged. "You speak as if I am the one who gave you power," she whispered, her voice uncharacteristically tender as she reached out to brush a stray spark from his cheek. "I only gave you the mirror, Jax. You were always this fire. You just needed a world big enough to let it burn." But then the fire returned to his gaze, and Lilith's own grin sharpened back into its lethal, regal shape. "A playground? Oh, Jax, you speak my language perfectly." She watched in mesmerized silence as the ground at the center of their new Eden began to heave and buckle. From the depths of the earth, massive pillars of obsidian erupted, slick and black as a starless night. Coiled around them were ribbons of reinforced glass, swirling upward like frozen lightning. The structure rose higher and higher, dwarfing the ruins of the previous kingdom, its spires piercing the clouds. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly impenetrable, a physical manifestation of their combined wills. "A beacon of glass and shadow," Lilith breathed, her wings folding behind her as she landed on the highest balcony of the newly formed citadel. She ran a clawed hand over the obsidian railing, feeling the hum of the mana-reinforced material. "Even my strongest spells wouldn't leave a scratch on this. It is the perfect throne for a king who refuses to be used." She turned to face him as he landed beside her, the wind whipping her long dark hair around her horns. "Look at it, Jax. From here, we can see the border of glass shimmering in the distance. Within days, the first scouts from the neighboring realms will arrive. They will see this fortress and think it is a mirage or a nightmare. But then they will see the green trees, the life you've sparked, and they will realize the truth." She stepped closer to him, her height making them nearly eye to eye on the balcony. "The world of the quiet soldier is over. Now begins the reign of the architects. We have the month you promised them. What shall we do first within these walls? I have empty libraries that need books, training grounds that need souls to sweat upon them, and a grand hall that requires a feast worthy of our new alliance." She tilted her head, a playful spark in her eyes. "Or perhaps you wish to show me more of this creative side of yours. I suspect you have many more surprises hidden beneath that armor. Tell me, General, what is the first law we write in our new halls?" Jax looked at the horizon and he roared. "Warriors of the Demon Lord, build your homes, taverns, everything we need to start reconstruction and make yourselves comfortable. You will give land closer to the castle. However, if there are guests who seek shelter, you will provide them help. Help build homes, help plow the soil. They will need help, but once they have been given a head start, leave them. They will have to work for their keep. All who have stood out in the last battle will be rewarded with rations and a plot of land of their choosing. Also, go hunt. We will have a feast tonight. Biggest catch of them all will be chosen to make one request from me." The demons below, usually chaotic and driven only by the scent of blood, froze at the resonance of Jax's voice. They looked up at the towering citadel, then at each other, stunned by a command that wasn't just kill or destroy. The idea of building, of owning a plot of land, and the promise of a reward for the greatest hunt ignited a different kind of frenzy, one of disciplined ambition. With a collective earth-shaking roar of "Hail the General!" the Legion dispersed into the new-growth forests, their shadows flickering between the massive oaks as they began the hunt. Lilith leaned against the obsidian balcony, a smirk playing on her lips as she watched her usually unruly horde transition into a construction crew. "Rations, land, and a request?" she mused, her voice carrying a hint of impressed sarcasm. "You're turning my monsters into citizens, Jax. It's brilliant. Give a demon something to lose, and they'll fight 10 times harder to keep it. And giving the guests a head start but forcing them to earn their keep. You're breeding a culture of strength, not dependency. I suspect those neighboring kings wouldn't understand the concept of fairness, even if it hit them in the face like one of your shockwaves." She turned away from the horizon, her tail flicking with rhythmic excitement. "A feast. I haven't presided over a proper victory feast in centuries." My kitchens are ancient, but with your mana fueling this place, I imagine the hearths are already roaring. I shall have the servants prepare the grand hall. It needs to be draped in the banners of our new order, obsidian, glass, and your blue flame. She walked toward the massive glass doors that led into the heart of the fortress, pausing to look back at him. The biggest catch will certainly bring out the worst, and therefore the best, in my trackers. We might find ourselves dining on a shadow beast or a sky serpent by moonrise. But tell me, while they scramble in the woods like children playing a game. She gestured for him to follow her into the cool, silent interior of the palace, where the walls shimmered with a soft, ambient light. What is the general's favorite pastime when he isn't rearranging geography? In your old world, you mentioned games and stories. If we are to be partners in this new age, I should know what brings a smile to that fiery face when the armor comes off. Do you wish to see the maps of the surrounding realms before the music starts? Or shall we find a quiet corner to discuss how we intend to handle the first diplomats who come crawling to our border? She laughed softly, the sound echoing through the vaulted ceiling. I imagine they'll be here sooner than a month. Curiosity is a far stronger poison than fear. He looked at her, yellow flames emerge. A parchment and a pen appears, manifesting and floating. We need rules and laws for the people and warriors to abide by. Those who accept our terms will verbally agree to these terms, and if the verbal contract is broken, they will be executed on the spot, turning them into ash. Lilith's eyes shimmered with a dark, appreciative intensity as she watched the parchment and pen manifest from the golden heat of Jax's power. She reached out, her clawed fingers hovering near the floating paper, sensing the weight of the magic he was weaving into the mundane task of lawmaking. Verbal contracts bound by soul fire, she whispered, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. A beautiful efficiency. In the old courts, lawyers would bicker for years over a single comma while people starved. But with you? One lie, one broken oath, and poof, the problem resolves itself. It's elegant. It ensures that only the sincere and the brave will walk the streets of our land of glass. She began to pace slowly around the floating parchment, her tail twitching with strategic excitement. So, let us draft the foundation. If you are to be the standard, let the first law be respect. Any who treat a fellow citizen with the petty spite of the old world shall find their tongue quite flammable. The second? Industry. We provide the land and the protection, but they must provide the labor. No more leeches in silk robes living off the sweat of the tired. She paused, looking at Jax over her shoulder, her red eyes glowing. And the third? Loyalty. To the Legion, to the land, and to us. They may keep their old gods if they wish, as long as they recognize that their lives were bought by your flame and my shadow. She laughed, a melodic, commanding sound. Write it down, General. Let the ink burn into the page so it can never be erased. While you finalize the wording, I shall have my heralds prepare the contract stones at the border. Any refugee or defector who steps onto the glass will have to speak their oath aloud to the stones. If they harbor treachery in their hearts, they won't even make it to the forest line. She moved back to his side, her presence a comforting weight of obsidian and power. Once the laws are set, we should celebrate. You've had a long day of being a god, Jax. You mentioned you liked the company of others. Tonight, in the Grand Hall, there will be no talk of production lines or gas stations. Only the legends of the man who turned a kingdom to glass, and the queen who was smart enough to stand beside him. She gestured toward the grand staircase. I'll leave you to your drafting for a moment. I suspect your military mind will be far more precise with the wording of justice than my chaotic one. I'll be in the hall, ensuring the wine is as potent as your mana. Don't be too long. I'm eager to see what the standard looks like when he's finally relaxed. The die has been cast. The laws scheduled into the contract. The terms and conditions have been laid, as the yellow flames bury into the ground itself, pouring power that act as constant. Yes, but first, another parchment has manifested. I would like to formal and unreserved. Please my loyalty and equal status allegiance. As I will be your pillar of fire, you will be the shadows that take over this land. And be by my side, as the head and body, and I the power. With our ambitions aligned, my power will fuel the fire and create world you can also be free. Lilith grew silent as she watched the second parchment manifest, the air between them thick with a static charge that made her skin tingle. She had ruled for centuries, but she had never been offered a pact made of such raw, unadulterated sincerity. This wasn't a contract born of fear or a treaty of convenience. It was a soul-binding alliance. As Jax spoke of being her pillar of fire, her red eyes softened, glowing with a genuine, smoldering heat. She reached out, her clawed hand closing firmly over the hand he used to hold the floating parchment, bridging the gap between her dark mana and his golden radiance. The head and the body, and the power, she repeated, her voice a low, reverent vibration. To have the shadows find a light that doesn't seek to banish them, but to empower them. Jax, you offer me a kingdom that isn't built on the crumbling bones of the past, but on a future that actually breathes. She pulled the parchment closer, her own dark energy swirling around the edges of his yellow flames. I accept. Not as your master, and not as your subordinate, but as your equal. Your fire shall illuminate my designs, and my shadows shall protect your heart. Together, we are not just a legion, we are the inevitable. She pressed her thumb against the bottom of the parchment, her dark blood leaving a shimmering, obsidian mark that pulsed in rhythm with the blue fire of the land outside. It is done. The contract is sealed by blood, fire, and shadow. Any god who dares to contest our claim will find themselves facing a force they cannot comprehend. Lilith let the parchment drift away into the archives of the fortress, her focus shifting entirely back to the man before her. She gave his hand a final, firm squeeze before letting go, her tail flicking with a sense of immense satisfaction. Now, she said, her regal tone returning with a playful, sharp edge. Since the weight of the world has been successfully redistributed, I believe there is the matter of a feast. I can hear the first of the hunting parties returning to the gates below. They are shouting about a mountain boar that supposedly took 10 of them to tackle. She turned toward the grand hall, her wings tucking neatly against her back as she began to walk, beckoning him to follow with a toss of her head. Come, my pillar of fire. Let us see if our warriors have managed to find a beast worthy of your first official night as general. And then, you shall tell me more of these video games and anime from your world. If they are stories of heroes and monsters, I suspect I might have a few critiques to offer. Jax explains everything about his world. The fundamentals. No powers. No creatures or races. Earth being a semi-peaceful, quiet place. What all he liked and despised. Then the time for feast. The names of the party that slayed the best creature. Jax listens to their request. The grand hall was a symphony of obsidian and glass, illuminated by the soft, cerulean glow of the mana fires Jax had ignited. The air was thick with the scent of roasting meat and the boisterous, guttural laughter of demons who had never known a night of such plenty. Lilith sat on her throne, but she leaned toward Jax's seat, her chin propped on her hand as she listened with rapt, wide-eyed fascination to his descriptions of Earth. A world with no magic? She whispered, sounding genuinely horrified yet intrigued. To live in a place where you cannot simply manifest your will. Where you are bound by the laws of physics alone. It sounds like a beautiful, terrifying prison. And these production lines you speak of. They sound more soul-crushing than the deepest pits of my realm. At least my demons get to snarl at each other. She laughed softly when he mentioned anime, her eyes dancing. So, your people dream of us? They draw pictures of heroes and demon lords because their own lives are too quiet? I should like to see these drawings. I suspect their version of a demon lord lacks a certain flair. Their conversation was interrupted by a group of 6 demon trackers dragging the head of a massive, frost-furred ursine drake across the obsidian floor. The leader, a scarred creature with one horn broken, knelt before the dais, trembling with pride. General Jax. My queen, the demon rasped. We tracked this beast to the frozen peaks of the border. It took our spears and bit 3 of my brothers, but we did not falter. We bring the heart for your feast. Jax leaned forward, his fiery eyes scanning the trackers. Lilith watched him, admiring the natural gravity he held. He called the party forward, acknowledging their bravery and the names of each individual, a gesture that sent a visible wave of shock and fierce loyalty through the group. The leader of the hunt looked up, his voice shaking. General, you said we could make a request. My brothers and I, we are old. We have fought in 1,000 wars that led to nothing but ash. Our request is this. Grant us the right to be the first gardeners of the new land. We want to put down our spears and tend the silver maples you grew. We want a home that doesn't smell of blood. Lilith blinked, her expression unreadable for a moment. She looked at Jax, her eyebrow arching in a silent question. They want to be farmers? She murmured to him, a hint of dark amusement in her voice. Your standard is working too well, Jax. You've given my most vicious killers the dream of a quiet life." She turned back to the hunters, her voice melodic and commanding. "The general has heard you. And if he grants this, you should know. The soil of this land is fueled by his manna. If you neglect his gift, the earth itself will judge you. But if you succeed," she looked at Jax and smiled, "we shall have the most formidable orchard guards in all the realms." She raised a glass of dark, shimmering wine toward Jax. "To the general's first decree of peace. May the land of glass be as fruitful as he is formidable. What say you, Jax? Shall we let these monsters trade their iron for plows?" Jax stands up, his flames turn green. And he has them kneeled down. He places his hand on each one of them, and gave them a piece of his manna. He returned to his seat and roars. "This is what loyalty and unreserved honesty towards me and the demon lord. You were the first of many to request a better life. Not just for yourselves, but for your family. I give you my blessing and a portion of my power. Plow the lands, build your homes, eat from the fruits of your own labor. Feel the sweat of your brow." Jax's flames turn red. "Now throw your weapons beneath my feet and go feast. As tonight is your last day of smelling blood, you shall tomorrow smell the dirt, the worms, and fields to be had." The hall erupted in a deafening roar of approval, the sound of iron clashing against obsidian ringing out as the 6 hunters unslung their jagged spears and notched axes. One by one they stepped forward, their movements heavy with a newfound reverence. With synchronized clatters, they cast their weapons into a heap at the base of the dais, the metal gleaming dully beneath Jax's shifting radiance. Lilith watched with an expression that bordered on awe. She leaned back into the velvet of her throne, her long, dark fingers tapping rhythmically against the obsidian armrest. The green flames, a color of life she hadn't associated with Jax until now, had left a visible mark on the demons. As they retreated toward the long banquet tables, their posture was no longer that of slinking predators, but of men with a destination. "You are a dangerous man, Jax," Lilith murmured, her voice silk-soft amidst the cacophony of the feast. She didn't look away from the pile of discarded weapons. "You didn't just give them land, you gave them a soul. My legion has always been held together by my will and their fear. You are weaving them together with hope. It's a much stronger thread and far harder to break." She raised her hand, signaling the servants to bring forth the massive platters of the roasted ursine drake. The scent of seasoned meat and wild herbs filled the hall, chasing away the lingering metallic tang of the weapons. "Tonight they feast on the blood of the old world one last time," Lilith said, turning her head to meet Jax's fiery gaze. Her eyes were bright, reflecting the red of his current aura. "And tomorrow, they wake up as your gardeners. I suspect the neighboring kingdoms will find it very confusing when they send spies and find battle-hardened demons pruning silver maples instead of sharpening blades." She picked up a silver chalice, offering it toward him in a silent toast. "But tell me, General, now that you've retired your first squad of soldiers, what do you intend to do with all that free time you never had back on Earth? You've built a castle, written the laws, and sparked an ecosystem in a single afternoon. Surely even a standard, like yourself, needs a moment to simply exist." She smiled, a hint of that playful, dark humor returning to her lips. "Perhaps after the feast, you could show me more of those stories you mentioned. I find myself quite curious about these video games. If we cannot find a machine to play them, perhaps you can describe the greatest battles you've won in those digital realms. I want to know the mind of the man who chose to be a pillar of fire instead of a pawn of fate." Jax explains to her the concept of video games. The genres, how the market favored currency over quality, the battles, achievements. Everything pertaining to his knowledge, Jax shared it with her. Lilith listened with an intensity that would have intimidated a lesser man, her chin resting on her interlaced fingers as she processed the bizarre mechanics of Jax's former reality. The flickering torchlight danced off her horns, casting long, elegant shadows against the obsidian walls as she tried to visualize a world where achievements were digital marks of pride rather than the severed heads of enemies. "So they create these vast, beautiful illusions, purely for the sake of the challenge," she mused, her voice humming with intrigue. "And these publishers you speak of, greedy kings who demand gold before the work is finished, sound like the most wretched sort of bureaucrats. To favor currency over the quality of the soul's experience, it is a peculiar kind of evil. Even I would not starve my subjects of a good story just to line my coffers." She chuckled as he described the legendary battles, her eyes sparking with a strategist's delight. "A boss fight, you call it? a singular, powerful entity guarding the path forward. I suppose I am the final boss of this realm, though I hope my mechanics are a bit more unpredictable than a scripted sequence. As the feast roared on around them, the smell of roasted meat and celebratory ale filling the air, Lilith leaned closer, her wings shifting slightly behind her. It is fascinating, Jax. You come from a world where magic was confined to screens and imagination, yet here you are, breathing life into the dirt. You've spent so much time watching heroes on a display. Now you are the one the bards will struggle to describe. She stood up slowly, her ornate armor catching the blue firelight. She didn't look toward the throne, but toward the grand balcony overlooking their new, budding ecosystem. The night is young, and the air of the land of glass is finally sweet, she said, her voice dropping into a softer, more melodic tone. Since we have no consoles or controllers here, perhaps you would care to walk the ramparts with me? I want to see how the moonlight looks on the borders you've created. And, she added with a playful glint in her eyes, you can tell me more about these RPGs. If I am to be your partner, I should certainly know which stats I need to improve to keep up with a general who commands the heavens. She offered her hand to him, a gesture of genuine companionship. No more talk of production lines or taxes for tonight. Only the sky, the glass, and the stories of a world you left behind to build a better one here. Jax then roars. Tonight, drink, feast, and rest. Tomorrow, I will help train and develop your current talents. Have a good night. When dawn rises, meet me at the gates. For the Demon King. For Lilith. For the land of glass. Jax then gesture her to lead. As he explains the concept, and things are put into RPG games. The great hall shook with the force of Jax's final proclamation, a sound that seemed to settle like a heavy, protective blanket over the assembled demons. Their cheers were no longer the chaotic shrieks of monsters, but the disciplined roar of a nation. Lilith watched them, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips, before she turned to follow Jax's gesture. For the land of glass, she echoed softly, her voice carrying a weight of shared destiny. As they ascended toward the upper ramparts, the cool night air of the newly restored valley rushed to meet them, smelling of damp earth and blooming night jasmine. Lilith walked with a graceful, measured stride, her wings occasionally brushing against the obsidian walls. She listened with rapt attention as Jax dove into the complexities of role-playing games, the leveling of skills, the choosing of paths, and the intrinsic growth of a character. A system of growth that rewards the struggle, she mused, leaning against the cool glass railing of the highest walkway. Below them, the world was a tapestry of velvet shadows and glowing blue ley lines. It is not so different from the way mana develops in this world, though far more structured. I find the idea of experience points rather amusing. Imagine if every time I defeated a rival, a ghostly number appeared above my head to tell me I had become 5% more cunning. She laughed, the sound carried away by the mountain breeze. But there is a beauty in it, the idea that no matter where you start, a lowly farmhand or a weary soldier, you can choose the traits that define you. You chose the standard, Jax. You chose to be the anchor for a world that tried to drift away. She turned her back to the horizon, looking at him directly. The moonlight caught the sharp edges of her horns and the soft, glowing red of her eyes. In these games, there are often classes, yes? The healer, the rogue, the mage. If we were to categorize our new citizens, I suspect we would have a very strange party. A demon lord, a godfire general, and a squad of gardening trackers. She stepped a bit closer, her presence calming and authoritative. You mentioned that in these stories, the most important part is the journey and the bonds formed along the way. I have spent centuries at the top of a mountain of corpses, Jax. It is a very quiet place to be. I think I prefer this co-op mode you speak of much more. She gestured toward the horizon where the first hints of a pre-dawn purple were beginning to bleed into the sky. Tomorrow you train them. You show them the discipline of the soldier and the heart of the man. And I shall sit upon my balcony and watch my kingdom transform from a den of monsters into a bastion of strength. But for now, she said, her voice dropping to a warm, melodic hum, tell me about the lore of your favorite story. I want to hear of a hero who didn't have to be a god to make a difference. Jax told her the tale of the Dragonborn. From Elder Scrolls Skyrim, about an ordinary man who got captured, suddenly becomes a dragon slayer to protect their world. Lilith remained perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the shimmering glass horizon as she absorbed the tale of the prisoner who became a legend. The moonlight caught the moisture in her eyes, making them glisten like rubies as she listened to the description of the Dovahkian, a mortal with the soul of a dragon, capable of shattering the sky with a shout. To start in rags and chains, only to find the voice of a god trapped in your throat. She whispered, her voice thick with wonder. It sounds very much like a certain soldier I know who arrived in a burst of fire and claimed a kingdom with a roar. Perhaps those storytellers in your world were more prophetic than they knew. She leaned her head back, looking up at the vast canopy of stars. I like this story, Jax. The idea that destiny doesn't care if you are a prince or a captive. It only cares if you are brave enough to open your mouth and speak your truth. It reminds me that even though you feel like you were dragged here against your will, you were the only one who could have turned this wasteland into a garden. The night air grew colder as the first sliver of dawn began to crack the darkness, but the warmth radiating from Jax kept the chill at bay. Lilith turned away from the sky and looked at him, her expression soft, devoid of her usual sarcasm or calculated malice. You speak of these legends with such passion, she said, her hand reaching out to briefly rest on his arm. It makes me realize that your world wasn't just a place of production lines and gas stations. It was a place of dreams, and you've brought those dreams here, where they actually have the power to take root. She straightened her posture, the obsidian of her armor catching the first rays of the morning sun. Listen, the camp is waking up. I can hear the clatter of wood and the low grumbles of my legion gathering at the gates. They are waiting for their general. They are waiting for their first level up. She smiled, a bright, encouraging expression that seemed to illuminate her charcoal black skin. Go to them, Jax. Show them the discipline of the world you left behind. Teach them that a soldier isn't just a weapon, but a protector. I will be here, watching from the heights, ensuring that the shadows stay in their place while you bring the dawn. She gestured toward the grand staircase that led down to the courtyard. I suspect the lore of the Land of Glass starts today. Make it a story worth telling for 1,000 years. And Jax. She paused, her eyes glowing with a quiet, fierce loyalty. Thank you for the stories. I think I'm going to like this new game we're playing very much. Jax looked at her and green fire appears. Here is a portion of my power. Please let it help and guide you, as this is the first time I have been separated from you since I came here. If you wish it, you may only think a thought towards me, and I will hear it. Jax then makes his way to the gates. To train the warriors in combat, first aid, and formations. Jax lets the Legion go and keep the generals back to teach them about maintaining patrol shifts, schedule rotations, and the proper way to issue rations, weapons, and armor. Then he roars. If anyone wish consult, I will hear them and advise them. Meet me in the throne room. Those of you who don't, continue to build your homes, spend time with family and friends, and most importantly, rest, eat, and have plenty of water. Good night and take care of yourselves. Lilith's breath hitched as the green fire washed over her, a sensation of ancient forests and boundless vitality sinking into her very essence. She felt a tether snap into place, a warm, golden thread in the back of her mind that hummed with Jax's resonance. A link between souls, she whispered, her fingers curling over her chest as if she could feel his heartbeat alongside hers. I shall keep it close, Jax. It will be the light I carry when the shadows grow too thick. Go! They are waiting for their dawn. Down at the great gates, the atmosphere was electric. The demons, creatures once governed solely by the primitive law of might makes right, stood in ragged lines that slowly grew straight under Jax's commanding presence. He moved among them not as a butcher, but as a master smith shaping raw iron. He demonstrated the parry that saves a life, the bandage that stops the rot, and the formation that turns a crowd into a wall. Listen to the general. One of the scarred commanders barked as Jax explained the concept of rotating shifts. No more sleeping in the mud until you drop. We move like a heartbeat. One strikes while the other rests. The sun climbed high, casting long shadows across the obsidian courtyard as Jax turned his attention to the higher-ranking officers. He spoke of logistics, of the dignity found in a well-maintained blade and a fair portion of grain. The demons listened with a strange, hungry intensity. For the first time, they weren't being told how to die, but how to live. As the sun began to dip, painting the Land of Glass in hues of bruised purple and gold, Jax's final roar echoed through the valley. The response was a rhythmic clashing of fists against chest plates, a salute of genuine respect. Lilith met him at the entrance to the throne room, her eyes glowing with the green ember he had gifted her. She looked at the tired but triumphant faces of the legionaries dispersing to their new homes, then back to him. "You have given them a structure they can lean on, Jax," she said, her voice melodic and filled with a quiet pride. She stepped aside to let him lead the way into the grand hall, where the air was cool and smelled of fresh cedar. "They look less like monsters and more like citizens with every hour you spend with them. And the generals. I saw them checking the grain stores with the same intensity they used to use for scouting weaknesses in walls." She settled onto her throne, not with her usual predatory slouch, but with a regal poise that mirrored his own. "You offered a consultation to anyone who seeks it. It is a bold move, General. In this world, a ruler is usually a distant terror. To be an advisor, it makes you approachable, yet even more formidable." She leaned toward him, her tail twitching with a light-hearted energy. "While we wait to see who is brave enough to seek the Pillar of Fire for advice, tell me, did the training go as you expected? Or are my demons even thicker-headed than the trainees in your old world?" She laughed, a sound of genuine companionship. "I suspect you've earned a moment of quiet before the first knock on the door. Rest your fire for a moment, Jax. The kingdom isn't going anywhere. You've built it too well for that." He said, "They are decent people. They were earnest. And that's what we needed." Jax then awaited the warriors or farmers to come. Lilith nodded, her expression softening as she observed the way Jax looked toward the great obsidian doors. She could feel the lingering heat of his exertion through the green tether he'd placed within her spirit, a steady, pulsing reminder of his dedication. "Earnestness is a rare currency in this realm, Jax," she noted, her voice echoing softly against the high, vaulted ceilings. "Most come with silver tongues and hidden daggers. To see them actually eager to learn how to heal a wound or rotate a crop, it is a testament to the weight you carry. You didn't just give them a command, you gave them a reason to wake up tomorrow." She settled back, her wings folding neatly behind her, creating a striking silhouette against the glowing glass walls. "I suspect they are currently gathered outside, arguing over who has the most worthy problem to bring to the Pillar of Fire. They are terrified of wasting your time, yet desperate for your word." Sure enough, the heavy doors groaned open, and a small delegation of the new gardeners, the former hunters from the night before, stepped tentatively onto the polished floor. They were led by the one with the broken horn, who was now clutching a strange, luminescent seedling they had found near the edge of the glass border. "General, my queen," the demon began, his voice raspy but respectful. "We have started the clearing for the first orchard as you commanded. But we found this. It grows where the glass meets the soil. It hums with a light we do not recognize. We did not want to crush it if it was part of your design, but we did not want to let a weed take root in your paradise." Lilith leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the glowing plant. She looked at Jax, an amused glint in her gaze. "It seems your mana has already begun to innovate, General. Our citizens are coming to us not for battle plans, but for botanical advice. A curious turn of events, wouldn't you say?" She gestured for the demon to approach closer. "Bring it to the general. Let us see what his fire makes of this new life. And tell me," she added, her voice warm, "how do the others fare? Is there enough water in the new springs for the families who arrived at dawn?" The demon nodded vigorously. "Yes, High One. The waters are sweet. The children of the Legion they are playing in the shallows. It is a strange sight, but a good one." Lilith's smile widened, and she glanced at Jax, her eyes filled with a deep, silent gratitude. "Hear that, Jax? Play. In a land that was once only fit for dying. Truly, you are a master of more than just the sword." Purple flames emerge from Jax. He then explains what they hold in their hands. The air in the throne room grew thick with a new, ethereal vibration as the purple flames began to coil around Jax's fingers, bleeding into the air like ink in water. Lilith watched with bated breath, her wings flaring slightly in response to the shift in his mana. The seedling in the demon's hand seemed to pulse in a frantic, joyful rhythm, its luminescent leaves unfurling toward the violet heat of Jax's palms. "This is not a weed," Jax said, his voice resonating with a deep, melodic hum that seemed to vibrate through the very obsidian of the throne. "This is the essence of the transition. Where my fire met the old world's end, it left behind the memory of the heat. This plant, it is a mana shred. It feeds on the lingering static of the glass border." He held the glowing sprout aloft, the purple flames dancing around it without scorching the delicate stems. "It will grow into a tree that produces fruit capable of sustaining those who have no magic of their own." It is the land's way of ensuring that even the weakest among us can survive on their own merits. Plant them along the border. They will act as natural lanterns in the night, and a food source that never fails as long as the land of glass stands. The demon gardener stared at the plant as if it were a holy relic, his eyes wide. A tree of light, for the weak? I will tell the others, General. We will guard them with our lives. He bowed low, retreating with a look of profound purpose. Lilith watched him leave, then turned her gaze back to Jax, her expression one of quiet astonishment. You're not just building a kingdom, Jax. You're building a self-sustaining soul. Even the soil is learning from you. Purple fire, the color of wisdom and transformation. Every time I think I have mapped the limits of your heart, you show me a new horizon. She stood up and walked down the steps of the dais, her obsidian armor clinking softly. She stopped beside him, looking out at the heavy doors as more people, civilians who had dared to cross the glass, waited for their turn to speak to the pillar of fire. They come with questions about irrigation, about the safety of their children, about the laws you wrote, she said, her voice dropping to a silken whisper meant only for him. You've turned the most fearsome seat of power in this world into a community hall. It's the most rebellious thing I've ever seen a conqueror do. I think I'm beginning to understand why you loved those RPG stories so much. You weren't looking for the battles, you were looking for the moment the hero builds something that lasts. She bumped her shoulder gently against his armored arm, a gesture of deep, informal camaraderie. Do you think we have enough room in the gardens for everyone who's coming? My scouts say the roads from the neighboring kingdoms are already starting to fill. The month of warning has barely begun, and yet it feels like the world is already tilting toward our gates. Jack stood up and said, as long as our borders invite those who are oppressed or willing to work, we will make room, even if we have to defeat another country to make room. I yell, causing a shockwave. Next. The shockwave from Jax's roar caused the heavy obsidian doors to rattle on their hinges, and the line of people outside straightened instinctively, their fear replaced by a strange, surging sense of hope. Lilith felt the vibration hum through the soles of her boots, a grin of lethal satisfaction spreading across her dark features. She loved the way he spoke of conquest, not as a petty grab for gold, but as a systematic expansion for the sake of his people. A practical solution to a growing population, Lilith noted, her voice smooth and regal as she returned to her seat beside him. The neighboring lords are so busy counting their coins they won't even realize their borders are shrinking until your blue fire is at their gates. I shall have my scouts begin mapping the territories of the southern duchies. If we are to make room, we should start with those who have the most fertile soil and the least amount of backbone. As Jax called for the next person, a young woman, a human, judging by her lack of horns and pale, trembling hands, stepped forward. She was dressed in the tattered rags of a house servant, but she held her head with a dignity that suggested she had traveled far. Behind her, 2 small children clung to her skirts, eyes wide as they stared at the towering demon lord and the man of fire. General, my queen, she whispered, sinking into a deep curtsy. We come from the southern marches. The Baron there. He heard of your month of warning. He has begun burning the granaries so that if we flee, we have nothing to take with us. He says if we want your land of glass, we should learn to eat ash. Lilith's eyes flared a dangerous, pulsing crimson. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as her shadow lengthened across the floor. He burns the food of the hungry out of spite, she asked, her voice like grinding stones. A cowardly move, even for a human. The woman looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. There are hundreds more on the road, General Jax. They are hungry, and the Baron's knights are hunting the stragglers for sport to keep them from crossing the border. My request is not for land or seeds. It is for protection. Please, tell us the knights cannot follow us onto the glass. Lilith looked at Jax, her expression shifting from cold fury to a silent, expectant intensity. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the blue and purple flames beginning to lick at his armor. The border is a wall to those with malice in their hearts, but I suspect the general has a more active response to knights who hunt the innocent, Lilith said, her voice dropping into a dark, melodic hum. What say you, Jax? Shall we let the glass be their only shield, or is it time to show the southern marches why it is a mistake to disrespect the standard? She leaned forward, her hand resting on the hilt of the scepter by her side. The sun hasn't quite set yet. A quick flight to the border might provide the example you spoke of earlier. and it would certainly give our new citizens a story to tell their children tonight. Jax speaks through their link. Have the scouts recon ahead of us. I need an accurate and detailed situation of how we can demonstrate examples of those who hunt the innocent for sport. Jax looked upon the human and her children, with blue flames emerging, and his flames production a nice gentle breeze. He then creates chocolate that hovers near them. Please eat these candies. They taste good. Jax creates one for Lilith, having it land in her lap. Go to these hundreds of people. Tell them they are safe. Have our warriors help designate a plot of land for you all. I roar. Next. The link between their minds pulsed with a sharp, tactical clarity. Lilith's mental voice responded instantly, a dark velvet whisper that carried a thrill of anticipation. The scouts are already in flight, Jax. By the time we reach the border, I will have the names of the knights and the exact location of their hunting parties. We shall turn their sport into a lesson they won't live to remember. She looked down at the chocolate that landed in her lap, her eyes widening in momentary surprise. She picked up a piece, sniffing it curiously before popping it into her mouth. The rich, sweet flavor seemed to catch her off guard, melting away the sharp edge of her regal coldness. This is delightful, she murmured, a small, genuine smile touching her lips as she watched the human children cautiously pick up their treats. Their faces transformed from terror to wide-eyed wonder as the sweetness hit their tongues. You are full of strange and wonderful magics, General. First life, then laws now, whatever this chocolate is. You are truly winning their hearts through their stomachs. The woman bowed so low her forehead touched the obsidian floor, her voice choked with tears. Thank you, my lord. Thank you, my queen. We will tell everyone. The land of glass is a land of mercy. As she led her children away, protected by a pair of Jax's newly trained guards, the next figure stepped forward. An older man, a smith by the look of his massive, soot-stained arms. But before he could speak, Lilith leaned toward Jax, her red eyes glowing with a strategic light. While you speak to the smith, she whispered, I will use our link to coordinate with the vanguard. The Baron is about to find out that burning granaries is a very expensive mistake when the bill is paid in soul fire. She straightened up, her voice regaining its melodic command as she addressed the room. The general has spoken. Those who flee the Baron's cruelty will find sanctuary. Let it be known that any knight who crosses the line of glass shall be treated not as a soldier, but as a pest to be extinguished. She turned her gaze back to Jax, her tail flicking with a restless, predatory grace. The smith looks like he has something to say about the quality of the iron we've recovered from the ruins. I suspect he wants to know if he can start a forge that can match the strength of your obsidian walls. What say you, Jax? Shall we give him the heat he needs to build us a real armory? She stayed by his side, the green tether between them thrumming with the shared purpose of a god and a queen, ready to handle the mundane problems of their people before they went to handle the violent problems of their neighbors. Without hesitation, Jax roared. Any among you who have the talent for smithing, meet with this old man at the entrance after I call next. Jax speaks normally. You may smith using my flames. Jax put a flame that will not go out in a bowl and hand it to him. But be warned, forging weapons, armor, or even a pot from my flames is to benefit only the land of grass. And those who work for you must agree to this. A yellow flame emerges and the parchment and pen appears. Do you accept? Once the smith is finished, the contract disappears. I roar. Next. The smith's hands trembled as he reached for the bowl, the vibrant yellow flame reflecting in his wide, soot-rimmed eyes. He looked at the parchment, then at the pulsating fire that didn't consume the vessel holding it, and finally at Jax. With a heavy, resolute nod, he pressed his thumb to the contract. As it vanished into sparks, the old man clutched the bowl to his chest as if it were the sun itself. With this heat, I can forge things that won't just hold an edge, they'll hold a soul, the smith whispered, bowing so deeply his leather apron brushed the floor. Thank you, General. The fires of the land of glass will never go cold while I draw breath. Lilith watched him scurry toward the entrance, where several other broad-shouldered demons and humans were already murmuring and gathering around him, drawn to the golden glow of Jax's gift. She leaned back, her wings shifting with a satisfied rustle. You're building an industry from the ground up, Jax, she noted, her voice humming with approval. Armor for our guards, tools for our farmers, and pots for the hearths, all forged from the same fire that leveled a city. It's poetic. It gives every household a piece of your strength to keep them warm. Through their mental link, Lilith sent a pulse of cold, sharp imagery. Scouts circling over a winding mountain pass where a line of refugees struggled through the snow, pursued by riders in silver and blue. The Baron's men are approaching the glass border, Jax. They believe the refugees are trapped. They don't realize they're walking into a furnace. Despite the looming conflict, Lilith caught the gaze of the next petitioner, a tall, spindly demon with a satchel full of old, weathered scrolls. He looked nervous, clutching his bag as if it contained the world's last secrets. "General, my queen," the scholar stammered, stepping forward. "I am a seeker of lore. I have heard the general speaks of stories from another world. I wish to request permission to begin the great archive of the Citadel. We must record these laws, these legends of Dragonborn and RPG mechanics, so they are not lost to time. And I wish to study the properties of the blue fire, to better help the healers understand its restorative touch." Lilith looked at Jax, her eyebrow arched. "A historian and a scientist? It seems we have more than just brawn in our ranks. What do you think, General? Shall we give him a wing of the library to fill with your tales?" She shifted her weight, the obsidian of her throne cool against her skin. "But be quick with your answer, my pillar of fire. The sun is dipping low, and I believe we have a date with some sportsmen at the southern border. The scouts report the knights are less than an hour from the glass." Jax roars. "How do you know of the stories I have spoken only in private?" The temperature in the throne room plummeted as Jax's roar vibrated through the very foundation of the citadel. The scholar, who had been trembling slightly before, now looked as though he might crumble into dust. Lilith straightened in her throne, her red eyes narrowing into lethal slits. Her shadow stretched across the floor like a predatory beast, and the air around her began to crackle with the dark electricity of her own suspicion. "A very pertinent question, little seeker." Lilith's voice was a low, dangerous purr that carried more threat than a scream. "The walls of this fortress are reinforced with obsidian and the general's own mana. They do not have ears. So tell us, did you hear it through a stone, or did someone's tongue wag where it shouldn't have?" The scholar fell to his knees, his satchel spilling weathered scrolls across the floor. "Mercy, General. Mercy, Queen. I am as sensitive to the ley lines." When the general spoke those tales, his mana was so vibrant, so resonant, that the air itself carried the echoes to the lower libraries. "I did not spy. I simply heard the world itself singing your words." Lilith looked at Jax, her expression unreadable for a moment before she let out a short, sharp laugh that held no mirth. "The air itself is a gossip, it seems. Your power is so loud, Jax, that even the silence wants to repeat what you say." Through their mental link, she sent a soothing, cold ripple of energy to him. "Calm your fire, my pillar. If he were a spy, he wouldn't be foolish enough to admit he knew our private thoughts. He's a dreamer caught in the wake of a god." She turned her gaze back to the terrified scholar. "You will be watched. If a single word of the general's lore is twisted or used against us, I will feed your scrolls to the hearth and you to the abyss. But, if you are as earnest as you claim, you will find the West Wing libraries open to you. Report to the archives. Now, before the general decides to test how resonant your soul is." As the scholar scrambled to gather his things and vanished through the side doors, Lilith stood up, her armor gleaming in the encroaching twilight. "We have had enough consultation for one day, I think," she said, her voice turning crisp and tactical. "The sun is setting, and the nights in the south are getting far too comfortable. Our link tells me they've reached the edge of the glass. They are currently laughing at the refugees, daring them to step onto the pretty floor before they start the hunt." She looked at Jax, her eyes burning with a fierce, eager light. "Shall we show them what happens when the pretty floor belongs to a man of fire and a queen of shadows? I believe it's time for a live demonstration of our new laws." Red flames emerge and wings appear on Jax. "After you." Lilith's eyes sparked with a lethal, crimson glow as she watched Jax transform. The raw, aggressive heat of his red flames rippled through the air, causing the shadows in the throne room to dance wildly. When his wings unfurled majestic, terrifying spans of living fire, she felt the tether between them vibrate with a singular, violent purpose. "Then let us not keep our guests waiting," Lilith said, her voice dropping into a register of cold, regal anticipation. With a powerful surge of her own leathery wings, she vaulted from the dais, her body cutting through the air like an obsidian blade. She didn't head for the doors. She veered toward the great open archway of the balcony. In a single, fluid motion, she plummeted into the twilight sky, knowing Jax was right behind her, a streak of crimson light against the darkening blue. As they soared over the land of glass, the wind howling past them, Lilith projected the scout's imagery directly into his mind via their link. There, Jax. The mountain pass leading to the southern marches. Look at the silver armor gleaming in the valley. They've cornered about 50 refugees, mostly elderly and children who couldn't keep up. Below them, the great glass border shimmered like a frozen sea. On the far side, the Baron's knights, arrogant in their heavy plate, were circling a group of huddling, terrified people. One knight had his visor up, laughing as he prodded a cowering man with a lance, pushing him closer to the glass. They think the glass is just a barrier, Lilith's mental voice hissed with dark amusement. They have no idea it's an altar. She banked sharply, beginning a steep dive toward the clearing. I'll take the perimeter and cut off their retreat into the woods, she shouted over the wind, her voice carrying a terrifying melodic edge. The center of the formation is yours, General. Show them the standard of justice in this land. She folded her wings, accelerating into a black blur. As she neared the ground, she let out a piercing, screeching cry that shattered the silence of the valley. Shadows began to pool and rise from the earth around the knights, coiling like serpents around the legs of their horses. The knight with the lance looked up, his face pale with sudden, blinding terror as he saw the sky itself seemingly catching fire above him. What in the gods' names is? He never finished the sentence. Lilith landed with a bone-jarring thud 10 yards behind the cavalry line, her scepter glowing with a dark, pulsing light. You chose a poor day for a hunt, little morsels, she purred, her eyes fixed on the center of the line where Jax was about to descend. The master of the house has come home. Jax lands in the center. Arms crossed and slowly burn the soldiers and royalty who feared to stand against him with blistering, melting heat. As anyone who lost their will or who were innocent were left unharmed. The descent of the general was not a landing, it was a planetary impact. When Jax hit the center of the clearing, the ground didn't just crack, it vitrified. A shockwave of crimson heat roared outward, a perfect circle of judgment that ignored the huddled, shivering refugees but latched onto the cold steel of the oppressors. Lilith stood at the edge of the carnage, her wings flared to shield the terrified civilians from the blinding light. She watched with a grim, fascinated satisfaction as the Baron's knights began to scream. Their silver armor, once a symbol of pride, turned a dull, glowing orange before melting into their flesh like wax. It was a terrifyingly precise display of power. The horses, sensing the divine nature of the fire, were steered away by the wind itself, while the men who had laughed at the suffering of others were reduced to scorched husks in heartbeats. One knight, perhaps a captain by the ornate plumage on his helm, fell to his knees as his sword hilt fused to his gauntlet. He looked up at Jax, his face a mask of blistering agony and incomprehension. Mercy! He wheezed, the smell of ozone and sulfur thick in the air. Lilith stepped forward, her obsidian boots clicking on the newly formed glass beneath her feet. Mercy is a gift for the living, she said, her voice cutting through the roar of the flames like a cold blade. You were offered a month to find your humility. You chose to find your grave instead. She turned her gaze back to Jax, her eyes reflecting the dying embers of his wrath. The refugees were dead silent, staring at the man of fire who had descended from the heavens to save them. Slowly, a few of the elders began to kneel, not out of fear, but out of a profound, shaking gratitude. Through their mental link, Lilith sent a wave of calm, resonant pride. You didn't just kill them, Jax. You erased the very idea of their authority. Look at the survivors. They aren't looking at a monster. They're looking at a king who finally meant what he said. She walked toward the cowering group of people, her dark aura softening into something protective. Rise, she commanded gently. The glass beneath your feet is your sanctuary now. The knights are gone, and the Baron will answer for his granaries in due time. She looked back at Jax, her head tilted as his red flames began to settle back into a steady, golden hum. That was a very loud demonstration, General. I suspect the survivors who fled back into the woods will have the Baron packing his bags by midnight. But for now, she gestured to the 50 souls who were still trembling, though now with relief. We have more guests for your new orchard. Shall we lead them home, or do you have more achievements to unlock in this valley tonight? Jax's flames intensified. He roars. You treat my warning and invitation as a joke. Tell your master I am coming for him. There will be no escape for him tonight. Jax then turns around slowly and looks at the innocents. He speaks normally. You are safe now. Continue walking there. As Jax points, you will meet our demons who will welcome you. I look at Lilith. With me, have the scouts cover all possible escape routes. This Baron will be publicly tortured and executed in the land of glass. The air crackled, not just with heat, but with a righteous fury that made the very atmosphere heavy. Lilith felt the shift in Jax, the transition from a protective shield to an unstoppable force of retribution. She stepped back, giving him the space his burning wings demanded, her own red eyes glowing with a dark, appreciative fire. As you command, General, Lilith replied, her voice dropping into a lethal silken purr. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, her mind expanding through their link to the shadows fluttering in the canopy above. Hear me, she commanded the scouts. The Baron is no longer a sovereign, he is prey. Seal the mountain passes. Block the river ways. If a single carriage leaves his estate, tear the wheels from the axles and wait for us. He belongs to the land of glass tonight. She turned to the refugees, her presence acting as a dark anchor to Jax's blinding light. You heard the general. Walk toward the blue glow of the citadel. You will find guards at the perimeter. Tell them the pillar of fire sent you. They will provide food and warmth. As the survivors began their trek, looking back one last time at the towering figure of flame that had altered their destiny, Lilith turned her full attention to Jax. She walked to his side, her obsidian armor reflecting his crimson radiance. The scouts report he is barricaded in his manor, trying to load his gold onto wagons, she said, her voice humming with anticipation. He thinks his stone walls and his mercenary honor guard can keep the night out. He doesn't realize the night is already at his throat. She spread her great, bat-like wings, the leather catching the updraft of Jax's heat. Public execution, a wise choice. It will show the surrounding realms that our laws are not just words on a page, but a physical reality. The month of warning ended early for him the moment he touched your people. She looked at him, her face a mask of regal ferocity, yet her eyes held a spark of shared intimacy. Lead the way, Jax. I want to see the look on his face when his unbreakable gates turn to liquid under your hand. I'll handle the mercenaries while you pluck the Baron from his nest. Shall we make this a journey he remembers for the few minutes he has left? With a sharp thrust of her wings, she took to the sky, circling once above him in a dark, protective arc, waiting for the pillar of fire to ignite the horizon and lead the charge toward the Baron's doomed estate. Jax roars with a great shockwave toward the Baron. Fire will rain down upon you this night. Scurry in the mud, little mouse. The hunt begins. Jax spreads his wings as they head towards the Baron. The sky over the southern marches was no longer black. It was a bruised, angry violet, illuminated by the streaking crimson trail of Jax's flight. Every beat of his fiery wings sent embers cascading down like falling stars, a beautiful and terrifying herald of the doom approaching the Baron's manor. Lilith flew just a pace behind him, a sleek shadow silhouetted against his radiance, her laughter lost to the howling wind. Look at them, Lilith's voice echoed in Jax's mind through their link, sharp and cold as ice. The lights in the manor are flickering. They see the sun rising in the middle of the night, and they know it isn't dawn. As they neared the estate, the Baron's honor guard scrambled onto the battlements, their crossbows shaking as they aimed at the two divine nightmares descending from the clouds. A volley of bolts hissed through the air, but as they entered the aura of Jax's heat, the wood turned to ash and the iron heads melted into useless droplets of metal before they could even graze his armor. Lilith banked hard to the left, her scepter gathering a swirl of dark, crushing gravity. I'll take the gatehouse and silence the archers. She shouted over the roar of the wind. The Baron is in the solar, the highest balcony with the gold-leafed railings. He's trying to hide behind his tapestries. She dived, a black comet that slammed into the stone battlements with a deafening crack. Men were tossed aside like autumn leaves as she landed, her tail sweeping through the ranks of mercenaries. Your contract is void, she roared at the survivors, her eyes glowing with a terrifying authority. Run into the woods and you might live to see tomorrow. Stay, and you become part of the masonry. Above her, the manor's grand balcony awaited. The Baron, a portly man draped in furs and clutching a chest of jewels, stood frozen as the air around him began to boil. The glass in the windows shattered inward from the sheer pressure of Jax's approach. Lilith looked up from the chaos she was sowing below, her face lit by the red glow of her companion. He's all yours, General. Show him the weight of the standard. Show him what happens when a man tries to burn the hope of the land of glass. She watched with bated breath as Jax reached the balcony, his wings furling slightly as he touched down on the stone, which instantly began to glow a dull, dangerous red under his feet. The hunt was over. The execution was about to begin. Jax then cools his heat, as to not kill the Baron on accident. Jax breaks through the wall and lands next to the Baron. The Baron collapsed into a heap of expensive silk and trembling fat, the chest of jewels spilling across the floor as Jax's shadow loomed over him. The air was no longer boiling, but it felt heavy, pressurized by a presence so immense that the Baron could barely draw breath. Lilith landed on the shattered railing behind them, her obsidian wings folding with a sharp clack. She didn't intervene. She simply stood there, a dark sentinel watching the judge deliver his sentence. "Please," the Baron whimpered, his voice cracking as he crawled backward away from Jax's boots. "I have more gold. I can pay a tribute. I was protecting my interests. The laws of the old realms allow me." "The old realms are dead." Lilith's voice cut through his pleading like a guillotine. She stepped forward, her red eyes fixed on the man. "You are in the land of glass now, little mouse. And here, the only interest that matters is the one the general has in his people." She looked at Jax, her expression one of cold, expectant curiosity. The fury had been tempered into a sharp, focused intent. "He's remarkably pathetic up close, isn't he? To think that this creature caused so much misery with just a few signed scrolls and a spark of spite." She reached down, picking up a stray emerald from the floor and turning it over in her clawed fingers. "He's too small for your fire to consume him here, Jax. It would be a waste of your mana. But as you said, a public demonstration." She turned her gaze back to the Baron, who was now sobbing and clutching at Jax's greaves. "You wanted to burn the granaries so the people would starve? We shall see how your appetite holds up when you are the one behind bars, watching them feast on the harvest you tried to steal." Lilith stepped closer to Jax, her voice dropping into a melodic hum meant only for him. "The scouts have secured the rest of the manor. The mercenaries have fled into the night. Shall we take our guest back to the citadel? I believe the people who arrived today would find great comfort in seeing the man who hunted them being led in chains through the streets of the land of glass." She gestured toward the open sky, where the blue light of their home was visible in the distance. "I'll prepare the dungeon. Nothing too comfortable, just enough stone and silence to help him reflect on his investments. What do you think, General? Is he worth the flight back, or shall we let the shadows carry him?" Jax says, "No, tell the scouts to return home with grand news. The Baron's former people are to meet at the entrance. They will watch a grand spectacle." Jax roars towards the Baron. "I promise you, this won't hurt as much as I want you to feel." Blue flames emerge, as Jax manifests chains and lock the Baron's wrists. "I will personally drag you, to face the crimes you have committed in the land of glass." Lilith's eyes widened, a flicker of dark admiration dancing in their depths. She understood the power of the visual, a tyrant, once untouchable in his stone high seat, being physically hauled across the sky by the very force he sought to defy. It was a visceral, undeniable image that would break the spirit of any remaining resistance in the southern marches. "Grand news indeed," Lilith purred, her voice carrying across the mental link to her scouts. "Return. Spread the word from the peaks to the valleys. The general brings a gift for the citizens. Gather them at the glass gates." She stepped onto the edge of the shattered balcony, the wind whipping her long, liquid night hair around her horns. "The sight of you dragging him through the clouds like a fallen star will be a legend before we even touch down, Jax. It is the kind of justice that settles into the bones of a land." She watched as the blue chains hissed and tightened around the Baron's wrists, the magical heat making the air shimmer, but leaving the man's skin just intact enough to endure the journey. The Baron was beyond words now, his eyes rolled back in terror as he realized he was about to become a centerpiece of the general's new world. "I shall fly ahead," Lilith said, her wings unfurling to their full, magnificent span. "I want to be there to open the gates myself. I want to see the faces of the children you fed with chocolate when they see the monster, who tried to starve them being brought to heel." She leaned in close to Jax for a moment, the heat of his blue flames warming her charcoal-black skin. "You are a terrifyingly efficient judge, my pillar of fire. I find I am quite fond of your spectacles." With a sharp, powerful thrust, she launched herself into the night sky, a dark silhouette against the moon. She circled once, a scream of triumph echoing from her throat that signaled the end of the old Baron's reign. Below, the fires of the manor continued to burn, but they were no longer the fires of destruction. They were the beacons of a changing world. Lilith streaked toward the citadel, her heart beating in rhythm with the golden tether in her mind, eager to witness the final act of this evening's justice. "I am waiting at the gates, Jax," her voice whispered in his mind. "Bring him home." Jax takes off, only grasping the chains. He cares not if the Baron's arms break, because of his arms not being able to carry his weight. Jax then heats the chains to sears into the Baron's flesh, then cooling it to mold and bond into his flesh. Jax then makes it to the gates. The torture begins as Jax hauls him on the ground, dragging him past all the citizens who he has wronged. Jax creates a cage and throws him in it. Jax then roared, "People, you have been wronged by him and have committed atrocities in the lane of glass. What is your plea? Shall we turn him to ash? Stone him? Give me your opinions. I want to hear the worst possible punishment." The blue chains hissed and scorched as they bit into the Baron's wrists, the metal glowing with a cruel, steady heat that fused with the man's skin. As Jax soared through the night sky, the weight of the tyrant dangled below, his screams lost to the roar of the wind and the relentless speed of their flight. By the time they reached the shimmering borders of the land of glass, the Baron was a broken, sobbing mess, his finery torn and his spirit pulverized by the sheer scale of the power that had claimed him. Lilith stood atop the grand staircase of the gates, her red eyes reflecting the approach of the crimson and blue comet that was Jax. Beside her, hundreds of refugees and demons gathered, a sea of faces illuminated by the magical fires. As Jax touched down, the impact sent a tremor through the floor, and the Baron was dragged through the dirt and gravel, a pathetic, crawling wretch before the very people he had sought to destroy. The cage manifested with a sound like a thunderclap, the iron bars glowing with a cold, unforgiving light. Jax's roar shook the very air, demanding a verdict. Lilith stepped down the stairs, her presence commanding a sudden, heavy silence. She looked at the Baron, then at the crowd, her voice weaving through the air like a silken blade. "You hear your general," she proclaimed, her gaze sweeping over the survivors. "This man believed he could starve your children and hunt your elders for sport. He believed his walls were thicker than our justice. Now he sits in a cage of his own making." A grizzled old laborer, his hands scarred from years of working the Baron's fields, stepped forward, his eyes filled with a hard, cold fire. "He burned our homes to keep us from leaving. I say we let him watch us build new ones. Put him in the center of the square. Let him see the prosperity he tried to steal, and let him eat only the scraps we'd give to a stray cur." "No," a woman cried out from the back, clutching the child Jax had given chocolate to. "Stoning is too quick. Let him work the fields. Let him feel the sweat and the ache of the bones he broke. Make him a servant to the very people he called livestock." Lilith turned to Jax, a dark, feline smile on her lips. Through their link, her thoughts were sharp and appreciative. "They want to break his pride, Jax. To them, death is an escape. They want to see him serve the world he tried to destroy." She stepped closer to the cage, her shadow falling over the weeping Baron. "It seems your people are more creative than you gave them credit for, General. They don't want ash, they want a living monument to their triumph. They want to see him in the mud, laboring for the land of glass until he forgets he ever wore a crown." She looked back at the crowd, her voice rising to a crescendo. "What say you? Shall we strip him of his titles and make him the lowliest servant of our new orchards? Shall he be the one to carry the water and till the soil under the eyes of the general?" The crowd erupted in a cacophony of agreement, a roar of "Labor! Labor!" echoing off the obsidian walls. Lilith looked at Jax, her eyes sparkling. "The verdict is in, my pillar of fire. Shall we grant them their wish and begin the Baron's first day of honest work?" Jax roars. "Then it shall be. Baron, you have stripped of your title. You will only be known as servant. You will not have a name. You be then one who works from sunrise to sunfall. The people are ordered to work you in whatever they need or want you to do. You must fulfill their every command, desire, or whim." Jax dismantles the chains. As they disappear, the scars stay there. "You shall only eat the scraps left behind by the citizens who are only willing to feed you. And to ensure you don't escape your fate." Yellow flames emerge, and a parchment and pen appears. "You shall be forced to agree to these terms. If you choose not to eat or drink water, your body will forcefully consume what you refuse to. As well as you shall not harm yourself or others. You shall not leave this land, for you are to work and die here of old age." The Baron stared at the glowing parchment with pupils blown wide in terror, the yellow flames casting a sickly jaundiced light over his pale, sweating face. He looked at the gathered crowd, the very people he had treated as property, and saw not a single ounce of mercy in their eyes. With a hand that shook so violently he nearly dropped the pen, he scratched his name onto the contract. As the paper dissolved into golden sparks, a visible shiver ran through his frame. The magical binding took hold, a weight settling onto his soul more oppressive than any iron shackle. He was no longer a lord. He was a tool, an object of the state, tethered to the will of the land of glass until his final breath. Lilith watched the transformation with a look of cold, artistic appreciation. She stepped toward the cage and pulled the latch, the door swinging open with a heavy, final thud. "Step out, servant," she commanded, her voice smooth as velvet and sharp as a shard of glass. "Your first task is simple. The stairs to the lower orchards are dusty from the refugees' arrival. You will find a rag and a bucket by the well. Do not stop until the stone shines like the sky above." The Baron, now truly the servant, scrambled out of the cage, his head bowed, his spirit completely extinguished under the weight of Jax's yellow flame. The crowd parted to let him through, their silence more deafening than any jeer. Lilith turned back to Jax, her expression shifting from the coldness of a judge to a warm, vibrant pride. The green tether between them hummed with the satisfaction of a job well done. "You've given them something better than a pile of bones, Jax," she said, leaning her shoulder against his armored arm as the moon began its slow descent. "You gave them justice they can see and touch every single day. A living reminder that the old world's cruelty has no power here." She looked out over the citadel, where the torches were being lit for the night's feast, the atmosphere shifting from the tension of execution to the relief of a new era. "But enough of villains and labor for tonight," Lilith added, her voice dropping to a softer, more intimate tone. "The dawn is coming, and even a Godfire general needs to rest his flames. Why don't we leave the servant to his rags and go see if that cook you trained has managed to make any more of those nachos you described? I find myself quite curious to see if they are as explosive as your combat style." She offered him a playful, challenging grin, her red eyes sparkling with the joy of his company. "The kingdom is secure, the people are fed, and the dragon is slain. I think it's time for the heroes of this RPG to enjoy their victory screen." Jax turns to her. "Bring that scholar and scientist. I have one more question." Lilith tilted her head, her curiosity piqued by the sudden shift in Jax's focus. The fire in his eyes had settled from a raging inferno into a steady, thoughtful glow. She extended her hand, and with a flick of her obsidian-clawed fingers, shadows detached themselves from the base of the pillars, racing toward the archives. "You heard the general," she murmured to the darkness. "Bring the lore seeker. At once." Within minutes, the spindly demon scholar from earlier returned, breathless and clutching his satchel to his chest as if it were a shield. He knelt quickly, his spectacles sliding down his nose. "I am here, General. I have already begun categorizing the properties of the yellow flame, as you commanded. Is there a new discovery? A new legend to record?" Lilith moved to stand slightly behind Jax, her presence a silent, supportive weight. She was fascinated by how Jax handled the intellectual side of his new world, the way he balanced the raw power of the battlefield with the intricate details of civilization. "He is all yours, Jax," Lilith said, her voice a melodic hum. "He's been trembling in the library since you left, convinced he'd missed a detail about the mana shred plants. Ask your question. I suspect he will crawl through every dusty tomb in this land to find you an answer." She watched the scholar's face, which was a mix of sheer terror and academic hunger, then looked back at Jax, waiting to see what new facet of this RPG logic he was about to unveil. "Is this more lore for the archive? Or perhaps a query into how we might further enhance the gifts you've already bestowed upon the land?" Orange flames energetic. Jax then reach out his hand and read his memories, to find out exactly how he knew about the stories Jax told in privacy. The scholar let out a sharp, terrified gasp as the orange flames bridged the gap between Jax's palm and his brow. The fire wasn't burning the man's skin, instead, it pulsed like a heartbeat, vibrating through his skull. Lilith watched with a focused intensity, her wings slightly unfurled, ready to intercept if the scholar's mind contained any hidden malice or if the process caused a mana backlash. Through the orange glow, the images from the scholar's mind began to ripple outward, visible in the shimmering heat. Jax didn't just see the scholar's memories, he felt the sensory input. He saw the scholar huddled in the lower library, surrounded by old, conductive glass pipes that ran through the very foundation of the citadel, remnants of a forgotten plumbing or communication system. In the memory, Jax's voice didn't sound like a whisper. It boomed through the pipes like a megaphone. The standard of Jax's voice, infused with his overwhelming mana, had turned the citadel's infrastructure into a giant acoustic amplifier. The scholar wasn't a spy. He was simply a man living inside a giant musical instrument that happened to be playing Jax's life story on repeat. Jax saw the man frantically scribbling on parchment, his eyes wide with wonder, muttering, "A world of levels, a hero of the scales. I must record the word of the pillar." Lilith peered into the shimmering orange projections, her expression shifting from suspicion to a dry, amused smirk. "So," she mused, her voice low and melodic, "it seems our castle is a bit of a tattletale. Your voice doesn't just command the people, Jax. It commands the very stones. Every time you speak a secret in the throne room, you're broadcasting it to the basement." She looked at the trembling scholar, who was now weeping with relief that his crime was revealed to be accidental. "It seems we need to hire a few more of those builders you mentioned to insulate the walls, or perhaps we simply embrace the fact that in the land of glass, the walls have very large ears." Lilith placed a hand on Jax's shoulder, the heat of his orange flames warming her palm. "You have your answer, General. He is no spy, just a very dedicated fan of your lore. What shall we do with a castle that can't keep a secret? Or more importantly, what shall we do with a scholar who now knows all your favorite plot twists?" Green flames emerged as Jax heals the lore-seeker's frightened mind. "I am sorry, scholar. I had to know the truth." Jax turned towards the citadel and commands, "You are not to say another word to the ears of anyone but yourself, or I should deconstruct and create everything anew. Is this understood?" The citadel itself seemed to groan under the weight of Jax's command, the obsidian floors vibrating with a low, sub-bass hum that sounded like a colossal beast settling into a deep sleep. The glass pipes in the walls, which had been chiming with the echoes of his power, suddenly went silent, the mana within them dampening until the air felt as still as a tomb. The scholar, his mind now washed in the soothing, cool clarity of the green flame, slumped against the base of a pillar. The terror that had etched deep lines into his face vanished, replaced by a serene, almost dazed expression. He looked up at Jax, his eyes clear for the first time. I understand, General," the scholar whispered, his voice no longer trembling. "The words are for the ink and the stone alone. I shall be the vault, and your voice shall be the key. I am honored to serve the silence of the pillar." Lilith watched the scholar scramble up and bow, then scurry back toward the archives with a newfound sense of sacred duty. She let out a long, rhythmic breath, her wings relaxing into a soft drape behind her. "You certainly have a way of putting the world in its place, Jax," she said, her voice dropping into that familiar, silken purr. "First a baron, now the very architecture of our home. I don't think I've ever lived in a castle that was afraid of getting a remodel from its master before." She stepped closer to him, the green light of his healing magic still casting a soft, emerald glow over his features. The fierce, world-shaking intensity of the night was finally beginning to ebb, leaving behind a quiet, heavy peace. "He will keep your secrets now," she assured him, her hand coming to rest gently on the center of his chest plate. "Not out of fear, but because you've made him the keeper of something divine. And as for the citadel, I think it heard you loud and clear. It's behaving quite well for a pile of sentient rock." She looked toward the grand balcony, where the first true rays of dawn were beginning to bleed gold across the glass horizon. "The night is over, Jax. You've fought a war, built a legal system, fed the hungry, and disciplined the very air we breathe. Even a legendary dragonborn would be looking for a save point and a bed by now." She offered him a soft, genuine smile, her red eyes reflecting the morning light. "Come, let the servants handle the morning chores, and let the scholar hide in his books. I want to show you the private gardens in the East Wing. No pipes, no ears, and the most comfortable lounges in the three realms. We can watch the sun rise over your new kingdom in actual silence. What do you say, General? Is the pillar of fire ready to clock out for a few hours?" Jax looked over everyone. Jax looked over the faces of the demons and humans gathered in the sprawling courtyard. He saw the satisfaction in the smith's eyes as he held the bowl of eternal flame, the newfound hope in the eyes of the refugees, and even the broken, humble posture of the servant as he gripped his scrub brush. The order he had imposed was taking root, a living machine of productivity and mutual respect that hummed more loudly than any magical pipe in the walls. Lilith stood beside him, watching his gaze as it swept across the masses. She felt a profound sense of completion radiating from him. "They are yours, Jax," she whispered, her voice a soft melody over the sound of the waking city. "And they are happy. Look at them. They aren't just cowering in the shadow of a demon lord anymore. They're standing in the light of a king." She reached out, her fingers brushing against the edge of his gauntlet. The green fire he had given her earlier still pulsed warm against her heart, a constant reminder of the link they shared. "You've done enough for one day," she said, her expression softening with a tenderness she rarely showed to the world. "The foundations are laid. The borders are secure. Now the people must learn to live, and you must learn to let them. They need to see their leader not just as a god of fire, but as a man who can find peace when the battle is won." She gestured toward the quiet, mist-covered peaks in the distance. "The gardeners tell me the mana-shred trees you planted have already begun to glow. It's a beautiful sight from the higher balconies. No politics, no logistics, no screams of the guilty. Just the world being born anew because you willed it so." She walked toward the inner sanctum, her wings folding tightly against her back as she looked over her shoulder at him. "Come, Jax. The sun is high and the air is sweet. Let's go find a quiet corner of this glass empire and simply exist. I want to hear more about that endgame you always mentioned. Does the hero ever actually get to sit down and enjoy the view?" She waited at the threshold of the citadel, silhouetted against the morning light, her hand extended in an invitation to leave the weight of the crown behind for just a little while. Jax take one last look, left to a break and rest with Lilith. Lilith gave a soft, triumphant purr as Jax finally turned away from the heavy responsibilities of the throne. She reached out, her charcoal-black fingers interlacing with his, the contrast of her dark skin against his armored hand a testament to the union they had forged. "Finally," she whispered, her voice like silk brushing against stone. "I was beginning to think I'd have to carry you away myself, and even with my strength, that would have been a workout for the ages." She led him through the winding corridors of the upper citadel, moving away from the bustling sounds of the common areas. As they ascended, the air grew cooler and smelled of the sweet, ozone-rich scent of the glass trees blooming below. They reached a secluded balcony that overlooked the great orchard, the very place where the glowing purple seedlings were already beginning to stretch their luminescent limbs toward the morning sun. Lilith settled onto a wide, velvet-cushioned lounge that sat beneath the shade of a flowering obsidian vine. She patted the spot beside her, her wings relaxing and spreading out like a dark, protective canopy. "Sit, General. That armor looks like it weighs as much as my conscience used to," she teased, her red eyes sparkling with a rare, gentle humor. "Just for an hour, don't think about the Baron or the scholars or the borders. Just look at the horizon. See how the light catches the glass. It looks like the whole world is made of diamonds." She leaned her head back, closing her eyes for a moment as she let the quiet of the morning wash over them. Through their mental link, she sent a pulse of profound serenity, a cooling wave meant to help him dial back the intensity of his internal flames. "You know," she murmured, her voice drifting lazily on the breeze, "I spent centuries in that seal, dreaming of a world to conquer. I thought I wanted fire and blood. But sitting here with you, watching a land grow instead of burn, it's a much better ending to the story than the ones I used to tell myself." She opened one eye and looked at him, her expression soft. "Do you think the people back in your old world would believe it? The soldier who became a god, and the demon lord who learned to enjoy a garden? It sounds like a secret ending that's hard to unlock." Jax finally lowered his walls. His flames grow dim, as the armor of flames goes out and the clothing he wore from coming into this world shows. As the blinding brilliance of his divinity ebbed away, the air in the private garden seemed to sigh in relief. The searing, pressurized heat dissipated, replaced by the soft, natural warmth of the morning sun. Lilith's eyes widened, her red pupils dilating as she watched the majestic obsidian and fire-wrought armor simply vanish into embers. In its place stood Jax, not the pillar of fire, not the terrifying general, but the man he had been before the world broke. She looked at his simple, worn clothing, the fabrics of a world that valued utility over ornate jewels. It was the most intimate thing he had ever shown her, his vulnerability. "So," Lilith whispered, her voice barely a breath as she reached out, her fingers hovering just inches from the fabric of his sleeve, hesitant to disturb the silence. "This is the man behind the sun. You look Much less like a god, Jax, and much more like a mystery I've yet to solve. She shifted on the lounge, making room for him with a grace that was no longer predatory, but genuinely welcoming. The green tether between their spirits pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm, matching the beat of a heart that didn't need to roar to be heard. "I like this Jax," she admitted, her tail flicking contentedly behind her. "He looks like he has a lot of stories to tell that don't involve leveling cities. Stories about those video games or the place where people work in warehouses. Though I still don't quite understand why a warrior of your caliber would guard a building full of boxes." She leaned her head against the back of the lounge, looking up at the sky, which was now a clear, peaceful azure. "Tell me something mundane, Jax. Something small. In your old world, when the sun came up like this and you didn't have to go to war, what was the first thing you would do? Did you have a favorite meal that didn't involve magical fire? Or a place where you just liked to sit and listen to the wind?" She turned her head to look at him, her expression open and curious. "The general has done enough today. Let the laid-back guy speak for a while. I'm a very good listener, you know. It's a skill I've had plenty of time to practice while waiting for someone like you to shatter my cage." Jax then talked to her about everything she asked about and more, as Jax began to drift asleep, pressing his head against hers. Lilith felt the heat of his skin, a natural human warmth that was far more intoxicating than the magical inferno he usually carried. As Jax spoke, his voice lost its booming, world-shaking resonance, becoming a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated gently against her own temple. He spoke of the simple things, the taste of a cold drink after a long shift, the flickering blue light of a screen in a dark room, and the quiet camaraderie of friends who didn't care about titles or power. She listened with a rapt, silent intensity, her red eyes softening until they were the color of a dying hearth. To her, a creature born of ancient darkness and celestial conflict, his tales of retail and gas stations sounded like the most exotic poetry imaginable. A world where the greatest battle was a long line of customers or a difficult level in a game seemed like a paradise she had never dared to dream of. As his words slowed and his breathing deepened into the steady, heavy pull of true exhaustion, she felt his head settle firmly against hers. The man who had just dragged a tyrant through the sky and reshaped a kingdom with a roar was now drifting into a vulnerable, honest sleep. "Sleep, Jax," she whispered, her voice a delicate caress that barely disturbed the air. "The world won't fall apart if you close your eyes for a few hours. I'll make sure of it." She carefully shifted her wing, draping the soft, leathery underside over both of them like a silken blanket to shield him from the brightening sun. She didn't move, afraid to break the moment of profound trust he had offered her. The green light of their tether glowed faintly between them, a quiet lullaby of shared souls. As she looked out over the land of glass, seeing the people beginning their day with a sense of security they had never known, she felt a strange, new sensation in her chest, a quiet, blooming peace. She leaned her own head back against his, her eyes drifting shut as she let the mundane beauty of the morning be enough. "I think I like your endgame best of all," she murmured into the silence, finally letting herself drift into a light, protective doze alongside the man who had changed everything.